And now on to up close and personal. You know what, in life we get to hear a lot of important names, but we never get to meet them or see them. Well, that's why we have this segment called Up Close and Personal. Today in this segment we shall meet a well-known lady by the name of Miss Tracy Rezvani. She is the administrator from the Office of Consumer Protection. The moderator on this set is our very own well-known attorney at law, Attorney Ramesh Khurana from the Khurana Law Firm. Let's hear this dialogue.
Welcome to Up Close and Personal TV show. Today I am really privileged to have Tracy Rezvani, who's an attorney by profession, but currently she holds the portfolio of an administrator, Consumer Protection Division of Montgomery County. Welcome to our studio, Tracy.
Thank you so much.
Tracy, of course, I'm going to ask you some questions about your role in the Consumer Protection Division of Montgomery County. I know that you are playing a very important role to protect the victims of immigration fraud and victims of other businesses. So let me ask you first, when did you take this position with the Consumer Protection Division of Montgomery County?
I started in April of this year, so I'm still fairly new, and it's been wonderfully exciting. There's so much work to be done, and so much progress that we've made in the consumer protection realm, but scammers are very industrious. So there's much more work to be done.
I know that I started working with you because I, along with my ALA national authorities, were working with you on some immigration issues.
Yes.
Because we were talking about protecting the victims of immigration frauds, especially so many notarios. They are active in Montgomery County and entire Maryland basically. And they are robbing off these immigrants or non-immigrants who are trying to help their friends, or they are trying to help themselves to obtain legal status. And these notarios, they come in and they say that we can represent you very well, and they do not know anything about the immigration laws. With the result, their dreams vanish and they lose their legal status. So this is how we met, and I'm glad I met with you because now probably we are going to work on certain projects on behalf of ALA as well.
Yes.
Now, tell me, what's your major role? Of course, I'm going to ask you some questions about some specific areas in this position while you are holding with the Montgomery County.
Sure. So the Montgomery County Office of Consumer Protection is one of two county consumer enforcement agencies in the entire state. So it's only us and Howard County that has a consumer protection division, and the rest of the state is covered by the Attorney General's office. And so we are focused on protecting consumers in the county, guiding merchants in the county to make sure they understand the law. And if there are disputes, we have investigators who we assign who then research the facts, research the law, and if there is a legal violation, we're also an enforcement agency, so we can issue fines and citations and issue statement of charges. But we also, because we are not simply out there to get the merchants, our job is also to make sure that we are educating merchants on what the law is as well. And so oftentimes what we end up is in a mediation role as well, because in lieu of having to have the merchant go through sort of the criminal process, well, if we can resolve the dispute, that's what we do. And it turns out to be a very useful tool for both parties. And we also have a fantastic mediator who assists us if the investigators are not able to do the mediation and come to a resolution. We do have a mediator on staff, and you can either come directly to the mediator if you have worked up the facts yourself, or you can go to mediation after going through the investigator. And as I had mentioned, we're limited to consumer merchant disputes that in some way center in Montgomery County, but there are merchant-to-merchant disputes we also handle. So for example, if you go into a store and buy a hard drive and it doesn't work and the merchant doesn't want to return it, well, you as a law firm are technically a merchant, but in this capacity you are working as a consumer. You were in the consumer marketplace. So we do assist merchants in their disputes with other merchants as well.
So when you're talking about the law firms, let me ask you a question. If somebody has a complaint against any lawyer and that person files a complaint with your office, so how are you going to handle that complaint?
Because that falls under the Attorney Grievance Commission's jurisdiction, we will then refer it to the commission. What we always tell consumers is if you don't know where to go first, come to us first, and then we will get you to where you need to go. So if you're not sure if you have a landlord-tenant dispute or if it's a consumer dispute or a grievance dispute, or you don't know where to go, you start with us, we'll get you where you need to go.
That's great. So same way, probably if there is any complaint against the CPA or a medical doctor, same way you are going to provide some kind of teaching support and then refer the person to the right agency.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. Now you were talking about the merchants. Let us say that I purchase certain items from a store and I have got a receipt for them, and the merchant is refusing to take the return of those items. So can you help me in this regard, like if I file a complaint with you?
Maybe.
Okay, okay.
So a merchant has to have a return policy, and it could be, I don't give returns, I don't do refunds. It just has to be clearly stated at the transaction, the point of transaction. So if you have a receipt and this merchant says they do refunds within 10 days and you try to go back within 3 and he still said no, yes, then there's definitely something we can do. If you are dealing with a merchant who is refusing a refund or a return outside of its stated policy, we might still be able to mediate that dispute for you. If you have a merchant who clearly said, I don't give refunds, I don't do returns, we might still be able to help you if the product is defective in some manner. But if it's simply, I don't want it anymore, I changed my mind, and if the merchant isn't willing to negotiate, isn't willing to mediate with us, then that becomes a different matter.
So mediation is one tool which you always use to begin with so that the issue is resolved.
Absolutely,
Okay.
because we always want to make sure that the consumer and the merchant walk away, if not happy, at least content with the resolution. And as you and I know, in the legal business, the best mediation is the mediation where both parties walk away having given up something, and
I agree with you.
they're not thrilled, but they're
Right.
pleased. They're
Otherwise, they are not going to agree to it.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure. Now, another thing, Tracy, we usually come across a situation, everybody buys a car. Let us say that I go to the car merchant and I have signed a contract to buy a car, and then my understanding is that within 3 days, if I change my mind, this contract can be rescinded or cancelled. Is it true?
No, it's not
This
true.
is not true.
No, it's a common misconception that car sales, you have a 3-day right of rescission. There are certain transactions where there is a cooling off period. Door-to-door sales used to be 3 days, but the Maryland legislature just changed it to 5 days. So you actually have a longer cooling off period on door-to-door sales now. There's certain other types of transactions.
Like
telephone-
refinancing the home, there is a 3-day period. Maybe this is outside the purview of.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But there are cooling off periods in certain transactions, but for most transactions, once you are done with and you've signed or digitally signed or ink signed, it's pretty much done unless there is some sort of a way of terminating the contract. So there may be some kind of fraud in inducing you to enter into the contract, or there may be other ways of terminating the agreement and scaling back the whole thing.
Okay. Now, similarly, talking about physicians, let us say that a physician has got my medical records and I need to obtain copies of those records. I request the physician for the copies, and he says that he's going to charge me some fee, and which I think is very unreasonable. So if I file a complaint with your office, how you are going to help me in that situation?
Well, the first thing that we do is we look to see if the charge is within the legal regulations. And so the state of Maryland actually spells out what kind of fees can be charged and what the limits are of reasonableness. And if you go to the Maryland Attorney General's website, they have a whole page dedicated to medical records and health records and the like. And so 76 cents as of 2014 is a reasonable per page charge, and they can charge actual postage and handling. So they can't have the same postage and shipping and handling charge no matter how much they actually did spend. They can't charge a processing fee, but if you had the records sent to a third party, say you're in a lawsuit and it's a personal injury lawsuit and a records company is requesting it, they can charge an administrative fee. And so there's certain fees that are permitted, certain fees that are not. And you can always come to us, we will look into it and definitely be able to guide and assist.
Now, let us talk about the notarios and immigration fraud. Now, let us say that some people had lost their lawful status because they were offered help by these notarios, and they charge a lot of money from these victims.
They do.
And they had an opportunity to obtain the lawful immigration status, but because of the mistakes committed by these notarios, these people are nowhere and they have become now unlawful. And we know that when a person has incurred some unlawful presence of more than a year, and if this person goes outside the United States, now the bar kicks in and that person is barred for a period of 10 years. So basically his immigration status is completely ruined. So in that kind of situation, how your office can help such a victim of immigration fraud?
Well, first, as you know, the Maryland has the Immigration Services Act, which requires that these consultants provide a contract and provide clear disclosure in the contract that they're not attorneys, can't give legal advice, and they have to have a prominently placed sign where everyone can see that they are not attorneys. So oftentimes with these services, these companies don't do all that. So that's a problem. Our office is working on, it's a new area that we're adding, is doing the investigations and enforcement into these notarios or immigration consultants. And one of the things that we can do is obviously try to get your money back from these companies. But because we're not an immigration services agency, we can't really help you with the big problem, which is how do you fix what these companies messed up in the first place. So, you know, we do have relationships with organizations and agencies that we can then try and find help, but our
like
services are limited.
Ella is one of them.
Absolutely.
Like you and I talked about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
But, you know, I think it's important to know that notarios and the consultants are not the only problem faced by the immigrant community. We had put together a top hit list, if you will, of common frauds so that we can start to educate the consuming public about what to look out for. And we are alerting folks so they know that the government doesn't ask you to pay by phone. They don't ask you to pay for forms. And their websites always end in .gov and not in .com. And they will never email you about a visa lottery. And so there's a lot of fake visa lottery scams out there. A lot of foreign students are baited into fake student visa scams, not realizing that only certain schools, accredited schools, can sponsor that kind of a visa. And oftentimes there are folks who think that if they pay for a job, then they can take the job, and never realizing that you still have to have a legal status in order to be able to accept a job. And frankly, you should never have to pay to get a job. So there's a lot of other scams that seem to be focused on the immigrant communities. And the Office of Consumer Protection is starting to reach out to communities through programs like this to start to bring awareness to these other issues.
Wonderful. Now, have you ever thought of filing charges against notarios where you come to the conclusion that these notarios have been representing to the clients that they are lawyers and they can provide competent legal representation, and the fact of the matter is that such a notario was never a lawyer in the first place. So have you thought of filing charges against such a person?
Absolutely. And in fact, this summer, as I said, this immigration scam, immigration services fraud is something that our office is focusing on this year. So this will be the year that we start to start the enforcement mechanism of our office and go after these companies who are violating the Maryland Immigration Services Act, and issue citations, issue fines, and issue statements of charges as needed.
I think, Tracy, you will kindly agree that people living in Montgomery County and other areas, they need to be properly guided and educated, like how they can reach you. Do you have any educational or outreach program so that people are aware about what you are doing? This is such an important part of protecting the victims from different kinds of frauds. How do they know about your office?
Right, and so obviously we're online, so we have a website that has a consumer A to Z and has all the advice that everyone would need in their day-to-day life, and so that's accessible through the Montgomery County Maryland.gov/OCP website. We have presence on YouTube, so we have infomercials and short programs that educate on certain topics on YouTube. We have it's a Consumer Wise is our channel. We have it on Twitter and on Facebook, so we will regularly put out information about recent scams or recent developments in the consumer arena, and so we do reach out through social media on this issue specifically because there may be language barriers within the various communities. We are creating specific flyers and then having them translated into various languages, and we're going to start by putting them into ethnic markets in the community language so that if nothing else, they get a brief message from us as well as our contact information. And it's also important to know that we have translators available to us for every language pretty much that anyone could want, and so we can assist folks no matter the language barrier.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tracy, for coming to our show.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure our audience has been immensely benefited by your presence here. Thank you.